This looks like a PowerPoint, but it's actually a website. And so you'll be able to go out and just look at this. You can look at it on your own phone or your iPad today by that address. And you can't hardly see it because it's real blurry. But that says web, CRE, and then the number 8, TIV, web creative, WEB, CRE 8, TIV, .wix, WIX.com, /FFCC for fundraising for controversial causes. So I built this little free website to experiment with this to see if I could make it look like a PowerPoint and have it operate like a PowerPoint, and it worked. And so I'm really kind of tickled about that. So so this is going to look like a PowerPoint, but it's web pages designed to look like PowerPoint slides, except you can scroll down on them, which is nice. But also I'll be able to, you'll be able to go back to this website at any time and look at it, refer to it. I'm going to always be adding new resources. So it's a living work in progress. So it's very cool. I'm very excited about that. So what we're going to talk about today is just really fundamentals of fundraising in a sense, but also some advanced topics. It's not just going to be real basic stuff. And a lot of it, oh, that's nice. That's cute. Okay. Anyway. So just so you'll know, when we're navigating around this site, you just go to the next page, go back up to home. It takes you back to the home page because that's where the menu is over there on the right. Okay, so we're going to just go to the introduction. And so I've taught this over and over and over, different settings. I kind of tweaked it for this conference. I called it fundraising for controversial causes. Okay, and I've done a lot of fundraising for prisoner reentry. I haven't ever done any for sex offender reform, but guys in prison, that's also a very low priority for people's givings, philanthropy. And because people want to give to, kids who need shoes or battered women, but guys in prison, oh, heck no. Okay, so that's one of the hardest things. Sex offenders is harder, obviously. And so, can we think of some ways that you probably wouldn't want to do fundraising for sex offenders? How about like going door to door or selling candy to little kids? That might not be very okay. So we got to think of some new strategies here. Okay, I won't tell you who told me those, but she's here at the conference. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to get out of the old mindset. You need a 21st century new, fresh mindset to fundraising. You need to look at it a completely new set of eyes, and so that's what we're going to talk about. So the old mindset primarily looks like donor contributions, like recurring gifts, one-time gifts, major gifts, grants, matching gifts. That's the 20th century, really. That's still a 20th century model is what we're looking at there. And it required extensive relationship building to acquire charitable donations from especially big donors. You had to work and build these relationships and all that, and which took away time from pursuing your mission. Okay, you were spending a whole lot of time. Now you still have to spend some time on fundraising. There's no doubt, but you don't want to create. Okay, here's how it works. You have a cause, you have a mission, you have a calling. You're like, I'm going to go serve the poor, or I'm going to help sex offenders, whatever that calling is. Well, then you have to create some sort of an organization back behind you to support that cause. And most people don't know what they're doing, so they create what? A dysfunctional organization because they've never built an organization before, and it ends up being very dysfunctional, and it ends up sucking the life out of them working on the organization rather than fulfilling their cause. Can you see that simple thing? That happens over and over and over, all over the place. So we want to change that. So it often required, the old mindset, the services of outside agencies who require payment for said services to assist in the fundraising efforts, thus reducing the amount raised. You had to pay somebody to do fundraising for you. Okay, that's sort of counterproductive, we can see that. So what's the new mindset look like? First of all, I believe it's sort of a philosophical shift from a poverty mentality of constant lack to a fundamental belief in the abundance of the universe. Okay, there's tons and tons of resources out there, no matter what your cause is. But if you don't believe that, you're not going to appropriate that. You're not going to step into that. Okay. I also believe that you're going to really be successful in 21st century. It can't just be one strategy. You can't just say, well, we're going to write letters and get people to give $25 a month or whatever. Okay, that is just too limited, and it doesn't really work anymore, I don't think. So you got to create multiple simple revenue streams, such as passive income from internet-based business models and other creative alternatives that we will be talking about as we go along. You need to leverage the power of the web, obviously, different techniques there that you'll be hearing about. The biggest piece of this whole equation, I believe, is partnering with sympathetic business owners and businesses to create outcome-based funding projects. They're looking to partner with social organizations to create certain goals. They want to see it as an investment, how they can make the community better. They want to invest in community health. They want to invest in community vitality. How can we have a healthier community? Well, you got to find those people. They're out there, and they don't want to give, I think I'll talk about it later, but they don't want to just give to you because you're a poor charity who needs charity to go do some charity. Okay, that's not really working. They want to see they want to see themselves as investors investing in something that's making the community better. That's the mindset you got to tap into. So it's really more of a business investment mindset. I got a call in April. We have a wealthy couple. They have a disabled son who's a sex offender. They have left $300,000 to create a program for disabled sex offenders. Would you like that money? I literally got that phone call, okay, from one couple. So, oh my gosh. Okay, so we're still working on that, but that can happen. I can prove that can happen, all right? I'm living proof. Okay, so we want to look at we want to think of it as economic development. You want to build things that are sustainable, things where there's income and it's ongoing and it's self-regenerating and things like that. These thoughts, these concepts have never really been adopted by the nonprofit sector for the most part, okay? Scroll up so everybody can see. Okay. You want to avoid government grants, stimulus money, all that stuff like the plague, okay? You do not want the government in your business any more than you can possibly help it, okay? You want to look to the free market. You want to look to the business sector and private sources, not public sources as much as possible, because you're going to give up, there's give and take in that deal, okay? Yeah, they'll give you some money, but you're going to give up some control. You're going to give up some transparency or something. They're going to have some influence there that's usually not good. You know, they always say one of the worst things you can hear is, hey, I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help. Okay, that's that whole thing, okay? And we want to move toward creating leaner, more streamlined organizations that have designed into their very foundations the elements for self-funding solutions. What does that mean? It means everybody in the organization is on this fundraising team. Okay, you want to, from the get-go, the way you do stuff, who's doing it, all that needs to be a passion for funding the organization. Okay, it can't be delegated to just one or two people or one department or that sort of thing. It needs to be. You'll see some of the practical ways of doing that as we go along. Okay, and I think it's a new style of leadership that creates strategic partnerships based on investment, value, and mutual benefit, rather than charitable donations to a needy organization. That's really the thing we're trying to move to. Now here's a big piece that most people miss. Remember, most grants and foundation gifts are for a particular project and do not provide funding for general operating expenses, like your salary, okay? Let me explain. Most of you might not know what that means, okay? You write a grant, you find somebody who is giving a grant for a particular subject, okay? They want to see you go and do a thing with that, accomplish a project or a mission, or they're letting out a grant to do a particular event or a particular thing, and that's all you get to spend that money on. You don't get to take that money and put it in your bank account for general operating expenses. It's very hard to find grants or even donations from private foundations that aren't tied to a particular topic or a particular spending objective, okay? What does that mean? If you're just starting, let's say you just want $10,000 to start up your organization, it's just going to go for general expenses. Very few funders do startups, okay? They want to see a track record. They want to see that you've been doing, they want to see all this stuff. Or let's say you're already in business, you've been going for 10 years, but you just want to hire 5 more people, okay, and expand your operations. There's some funders that'll do that, but they're the fraction of the fraction, okay? Most funders are looking for a particular return on investment in a particular activity, okay? And that's most nonprofit executives who are new, who don't understand that. It's a very disappointing reality when that finally sets in. Just having a grant writer or just knowing where some grants are, and even having a qualified grant writer who comes and volunteers, I'll write grants for your organization. That doesn't necessarily mean your budget's going to increase. They might go find you some grants, but you have to do this project over here that really wasn't your mission, wasn't exactly, but you got the money just because it was there. And then I never want you as an organization to go get a grant that causes you to have to do something different than what your core mission was. Okay, don't go do, like if you're in employment, don't go do mentoring just because there's a mentoring grant when mentoring wasn't in your mission. Okay, people do that all the time. It's just sad. It's called being a grant-based organization rather than a mission-based organization. So I'm trying to cover some territory here. I'm going to move on. The fundamental model that I teach that's worked for a lot of organizations, and this did not come from me. It says down here at the bottom. This came from a guy named Bob Beal, who's a famous nonprofit consultant. I learned this from him. It's an acronym called PACE, and it stands for programs or the things that you do to carry out your mission, administration, capital development or fundraising, and evaluation, which is goal-based governance, which I'm going to explain in a second. Most people say when we're doing our organization's activities, we're fulfilling our mission, and they only think about it. 100% of their effort goes into doing the work of the organization, okay? But you have to divide your efforts up 25, 25, 25, and 25%. You have to be doing all of these things in equal balance to be a healthy, well-governed, well-managed, smoothly operating organization, okay? Let's say you were a crisis pregnancy center and you were helping pregnant women, okay? Just serving those women shouldn't be 100% of your activity. It should be 25%, okay? Because you got to do these other things. You have to be well administered, which is all the back office stuff, the paperwork, compliance stuff, fundraising, at least 25%, okay? Not 100%. Fundraising should not consume you to where it's all you do, but also it can't be zero. So it needs to be about 25% of your overall effort of your organization. And then evaluation, this one's not self-explanatory. I'm going to tell you what that is. A well-managed, balanced, healthy organization has the board sets goals for the organization. You have goal-based governance, because that's the number one job of a board is to govern, okay? And the board should set goals for the organization, usually like one-year goals, and then there should be evaluation on a quarterly basis. Are we working toward those goals? How are we doing? You can't just delegate that. A board can't just hire an executive director and forget about it, and just assume that executive director is carrying out the mission of the organization. So the board needs to be very active in setting goals and then evaluating those. And that's an ongoing, but that's mostly the board doing that, checking. And then there needs to be quarterly progress reports. That's another topic. But there needs to be good information flowing back to the board. How are we doing? Okay. So we can see that you need to make a firm commitment to spending at least 1/4 of all your time and energy on the mission of fundraising. Yeah, I mean, there's an administrative side to an organization that most cause-based or, what am I trying to say? Yeah, people who are focused on their calling of serving their constituency, they're usually not good administrators. They're usually very passionate, pioneering kind of people, okay? But you need to have somebody on the team or several somebodies who are also keeping the books in order and keeping all the paperwork and all that.
There could be a salary in there.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. This is just how this is
more
more like, right, it's the time of the organization divided into these 4 groups.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I just want to make a note here. In this presentation, I use the terms fundraising and development interchangeably. Okay, development is sort of the buzzword in the fundraising industry for fundraising. Okay, so when we talk about development, we're talking about fundraising. So capital development is the same as this is the nonprofit development architecture that I created to just kind of show how a mature organization does organize itself around fundraising. And this is just some concepts. I don't expect you to go and implement this because this would typically only be implemented by a larger, you would need a staff of 8 or 12 people to be able to do this, okay? Medium to larger nonprofits would do this, but the concepts are there just so that to communicate to you, even if you're a one-person organization, you need to understand the concepts even if you don't have a whole team to implement it, okay? So we're going to start here. This is the CEO, or in some organizations, they actually have a development officer, somebody who's an executive in charge of fundraising, okay? This is the board of directors. The board of directors has 3 jobs. Governance, and I think it's in this order, fundraising, and hiring the executive director and holding them accountable creating their job description and holding them accountable. The executive director works for the board, okay? So for the board to be good at fundraising, there needs to be a development committee, which is a few of the board members, usually 2 or 3 or 4, not 2, 3 or 4, that have a calling or a ability in the area of fundraising. You want to, the whole board needs to take ownership of the responsibility for fundraising, but then you're going to have some board members who specialize in that, and they would become the development committee of the board, okay? Then you want to form a team, a development team, which is, and you don't have to take a lot of notes on this because this is all explained on the following slide. I have definitions for each of these boxes, but I'm going to talk you through it. Development team is made up of 3 kinds of people. Some board members who are on the development committee who have time to actually do some fundraising, not just oversee the fundraising. The development committee oversees the fundraising, but some of them might actually go do some fundraising too. So you want some board members on your team, a couple of staff members on your team, and some volunteers on your team. So the development team, the fundraising team, is made up of volunteers, staff, and board. Okay? And so you want a team, probably six or 7 people out there. Wouldn't that be awesome to have 6 or 7 people committed to actually doing fundraising? Okay? So what do? What does the development team do? You see it's a dotted line. The CEO oversees the staff. The staff work for the CEO. But the CEO is not supposed to do any direct fundraising with one exception. Okay? There's day-to-day fundraising stuff that needs to be happening all the time that's the responsibility of the team. The executive director, or CEO, is responsible for the whole organization, including fundraising. Now, where does the executive director or CEO, what kind of fundraising do they do? For sure, they do direct fundraising to who? Major donors. You got major donors, you got wealthy people out there. That your CEO needs to have a pool of about 20 or more wealthy individuals that he or she is building a direct relationship with. They want to see the CEO or executive director is the face of the organization to those wealthy people. Okay, so that's the best, one of the best bangs for the buck in fundraising is to have your executive director be a fairly charismatic person who knows some wealthy people and who knows how to go out and build relationships with those wealthy people. But the rest of the work, which is divided into 3 areas, well, 4 including the website, programs, campaigns, and events. And fundraising programs are things that you do to raise money to buy a new van. I'm sorry, that's a campaign. A program is more like a, well, I'm going to give you my definition here. I'll show you my definitions. There's programs and there's projects. Programs are things that the organization does. It carries out your mission of your organization, the programs that you lobby, you advocate, whatever it is you're doing, okay? Programs is where the money gets spent. Programs don't make you money. Programs cost you money. That's what you're raising money to do, is to carry out your programs. There's also supposed to be one here called projects. Projects is what you do to generate income for the organization, typically in the form of, these are campaigns, events, conferences, or some other model, but are typically done in conjunction with other nonprofits, okay? So projects you do with like a joint effort, like a golf, let's say you have a golf outing for 3 or 4 organizations get together and you share the revenue from that, okay? So if we go back and look at the model, the campaigns and events, campaigns are where you raise money for a particular cause, like you're gonna build a new building, you're gonna buy a new van, you have a campaign to raise money for that particular item. An event is something that you do to raise general operating funds for your organization, like a banquet. Typically, it's a banquet. Okay, there's other kinds of events. I've seen golf outings and different things done to raise, and the events are where a lot of the impact is, because you can use that money for whatever. It's not designated to just for a van or just for a new building. Okay, and then projects are basically like events, but you do them in conjunction with other organizations. Okay, but a lot of your passive income should be focused or can derive from your website. Most people think of their website as a thing that costs them money. A website is supposed to make you money, okay? And that's a big mind shift for a lot of people. They never even thought about that. But we're going to talk about some ways that your website should be making you money passively, ongoing from now on. You know, you've got to have a good website to be considered a credible organization at all anymore. But not just a good website, but a fundraising website, a website that makes you money. We're going to talk about it. And what you do is you tap into external fundraising tools that are out there that you build into your website to help you with that. Now, I also talked about major donors. Where do major donors come from? Primarily from the business community, okay? These are executives, wealthy people who are leaders in the community, or retired executives. That's where a lot of the wealth in your community is going to reside. And I put local government on here. Local government typically knows about your organization through the programs that you're doing. You're out there, you're providing these services, you're providing these resources in the community, and you think of local government sometimes even as the enemy, okay? But really in the bigger context of fundraising, the local government's job is to create a healthy business community so the businesses are thriving, so that then you have people who are making money that then you can go to tap into your resource there. So, but right here, if you didn't hear anything else that I said, I'm trying to give you the bigger picture here, but the focus is right in here. This structure, you need, no matter how the size of your organization, you need to have a board. It needs to be a good board. It needs to be committed to fundraising. It needs to be a few people who step up, and then you get involved. Whether this is 3 people or 8 people, there needs to be some people who are willing to actually go do the hard work of fundraising. So that's sort of like fundraising 101, as I was saying. I was going to talk about that a little bit. Okay. So when we go into the components of fundraising, those are the pieces that we just talked about in the model. So I believe the number one thing you have to have personally in your toolbox is a creative mind. One of the things I find to be very stimulating to me is reading books on successful people. When I'm really stuck, when I'm not knowing what the next thing is to do, I'm frustrated, I'll go read about somebody that I admire, and somehow that stimulates me. It's going to be different for you. There's going to be things that you can do to get your creative thinking back on. Now, more practically, donor letters. I believe that this is, in a controversial cause, the best thing you can do is when you find somebody who's sympathetic to your cause, you don't know how much money they have. You don't know whether they're a potential small donor or a large donor, but you need to reach out to them. Once that contact is made, you need to follow up, and you need to follow up with a quality letter. You need to be a good letter writer, okay? And if you're mailing them a letter, I recommend you put it in some sort of a package. You need to look like you have your act together, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. But I call it a marketing packet. It needs to come in a nice folder. It needs to have a nice looking brochure. It needs to have a nice business card. You need to put that. Otherwise, I hate this part of it, but it's about image, okay? People look at who do you look like you have your act together. And sometimes, even if we don't have our act together, we need to look like we have our act together. I don't recommend not having your act together, but you need to have a rudimentary level of marketing materials put together. Okay? It doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. You can, with color printing at home, you can do a lot of this yourself, but it needs to look good. So what does that consist of? Okay, marketing pack is just collateral materials to support your efforts. It's typically the minimum is going to be a brochure, a business card, and some testimonials. Okay? Now, the look and feel of these materials needs to look integrated. If you have a little color scheme, the brochure needs to look like the business card, which looks like your letterhead, which looks like your website. Okay? They need to be coordinated. The information, we're going to talk about this at great length in a minute, but the information needs to say the same thing. If they go to your website or they're reading your brochure or whatever, they need to be reading the same message. You need to have a coherent, consistent message. Now, we talked about basic website. You have got to have a reasonable looking website out there. First thing they're going to do is they're going to look at your online personality. Just like when you're talking about if you're out interviewing for a job, watch out what you're putting on your social media, Twitter and LinkedIn and all that stuff, because potential employers are going to go look at your online personality. Same with fundraising. Okay? You have to have a reasonable looking online personality. First place they're going to go is to your website. Websites have gotten a lot easier. Templates, all that stuff. You can do your own website and have it look pretty professional. Some people just aren't technical enough even to do that, so you may have to get some help with that. Okay? The advanced website, that's really where I want to focus though. You want to, as you grow your organization, you want to be moving always more and more to more advanced tools to generate revenue from your website without you having to do any work, okay? So it takes some planning and some effort, but you can build a website that motivates your visitors to become donors and to keep coming back for more information and more future donations. From the home page to the video archives, you can weave the theme of funding and support through all aspects of the site. Is that easy? No. Is it important? Yes. Okay? And the way that you create, you can have the best website in the world. Best colors, best graphics, no spelling errors. But if you don't have any traffic, nobody's seeing your website. Okay? And there's one way that you create traffic that really works in a long-term fashion. I mean, you could pay somebody to generate traffic to your website. Who wants to? That's defeat. If you're having to pay for it, then you're backwards. Okay, you're spending money to make money. Okay. The way that you generate traffic to your website is to have it be interesting. It has to have lots of good, meaningful information in whatever your segment is, whether it's sex offender reform or some aspect of that, whatever you're specializing in on your website about your organization. You need to be about an inch wide and a mile deep. You need to be an oasis of information on that topic so that when that person thinks, now where did I see that on the web that was so interesting, they'll come back and they'll come back. You want to create a website that people want to come back to over and over because you're always adding new stuff. You're adding interesting stuff. It's an information-rich website. That's how you generate traffic on your website. It needs to become the place to go for that topic. That's because there are literally websites out there who they had no idea what they were doing when they started. They just started building a website, but they were masters of that topic. There's a guy, you go to videogester.com. I love this guy. He teaches people how to make videos. Videogester.com. He started 15 years ago. He's making $10,000 a month off of his website, off of Google AdWords. He just embeds Google AdWords around the edge of that website. He's getting $10,000 a month from Google because he has so much traffic. He's the guy for that on the whole web. He generates so much traffic because he's been doing it for years and years, and it's just a really interesting website. It's the source of information on that topic. I wouldn't mind having $10,000 a month passive income from Google sending me a check. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm not saying you're going to have that, but that's the potential of that passive income because he has an information-rich website. Okay? Now, the other thing you really want to look at is selling stuff. Okay? If you have the time and ability, consider selling things to raise money for your cause. T-shirts are probably your best option, but the choices are, it could be, there's all kinds of things. But I like T-shirts because the technology has advanced now. There are online, web-based T-shirt services. So when you have a design, you put a button on your shopping cart that says, buy our T-shirt. They click through that, and it sends an order to that company, and they generate that T-shirt right then, dynamically, and mail it to them. You don't have to buy 10,000 T-shirts anymore. You don't have to buy 200 T-shirts anymore. They'll actually do them one-off. That's crazy. I don't know how they make any money at that, but they do it. You're going to pay a little bit more per T-shirt for your cost to have that, but then you're not having to buy all those T-shirts ahead of time. So the technology is really getting us some stuff that were never options before.
I was curious. I mean, the traffic to your website is key, but in order to come back to your website, they have to go there the first time.
Right.
I'm not smart enough to understand how you get people to go to your website the first time so they can come back.
Well, hopefully you have, you build a website so that search engines find it, okay? And that's gotten a lot easier. You don't have to do all the search engine optimization that you used to have to do. But you want to drive traffic to your website through your business card, your brochure, your presentations. Everywhere you go, you should be driving people to your website. It should be, that's just part of your the promotion of your organization.
I'll say RSOL.com.
Absolutely.
RSOL.com.
Absolutely. It should be, you should stamp that on. I mean, if you've got a business card and it doesn't have your website on it, oh my gosh, shame on you. So it needs to be, your organization needs to be very, very consistent in how you drive traffic. These are the basic elements. This is the elements page of my presentation. These are the basic elements of fundraising. You're trying to get to here. You're trying to get some funding, okay? And most people just go to write some grants or let's just go out there and just get some funding. Well, you need a plan, okay? And this is the best tool I have ever seen for just consistency in your overall plan. It's called a case statement. And you can get like Fundraising for Dummies or any of those publications to teach you all the elements of that. But basically, the case statement is you're arguing the case for why somebody should give to your organization. And it needs to be all the verbiage that you would say about your organization, who our board is, how we're led, what our mission, what's our vision, what's our, all that stuff, the budget, so you write that one time. You write that whole case statement one time and you get all the official wording and verbiage the way you want it said. So when you write a grant or you make a website or you're doing a brochure, you're just pulling language from this case statement. Everything is already written one place. You've agreed as a board, this is what we want to say. We're all singing off the same page in the hymnal. We're all saying the same thing. We're using the same verbiage. No typos, that whole thing. You could just cut and paste. If you write this the right way, no matter what grant you're writing, every grant application asks for basically the same information. They just reorder it in different sequences and things, different emphases, but you need to write everything in one. Well, where's that stuff come from? The language for your case statement comes from two places. Actually, three. You need an operations plan. Here's how we do what we do. An operations plan typically has a 1-year planning window. You need a marketing plan. Here's how we're going to market our organization because people need to know about you. And that derives from a strategic plan. So this is a planning effort. Looks like you write the strategic plan, which has a typically 3 to 5 year window. You need an operations plan, a marketing plan. From that, you pull, then you've written most of everything you want to say at some point in one of these documents. You pull those together. Put it in a case statement. It's got everything you want to say. Then you're ready to go seek funding.
Is that a case statement like an executive summary type?
No, it's paragraph after paragraph of all the different elements that you would want to say about your organization. Here's our mission statement. Here's our vision statement. Here's our purpose. Here's our board. Because you're writing a grant. Well, who's on your board? But whether you're writing a grant or writing a letter or putting together your marketing pack or your brochure, whatever you're doing, you need to be saying the same thing consistently. And the way that you do that is you write it one time and put all that in the case statement. Then you just pull from that. And that needs to be reevaluated every year. It's your annual planning thing. You need to update this stuff. Okay, so to put all that in context, I'm trying to give you like the big picture, but there's just the rolling up your sleeves and just going out there and making it happen too. I mean, there's really both, okay? This is a page I'm building. This is a resources page. I'm adding books, software programs, services, and professional assistance. So here's my shameless plug for me down here in the fine print, okay? But I'm not here to sell you anything, absolutely not. So this will be growing, as I find more books and more software things, but there's already some great stuff out there. If you want to learn fundraising and go and be self-taught, this is where you start. Your donors, when you find a sympathetic donor for sex offender reform, you found a treasure, okay? These are people, they're treasures. You need to treasure your donors, okay? And this is Mercy Heart. This is an organization I've been working with. They're based in Fort Worth. He wrote this email to the board one day, and I love the wording of this. It's not specific to sex offenders, but Mercy Heart ministers to the families of the incarcerated, okay? So Roger said, last week I was thinking about why it seems so difficult to ask people for money to help fund the ministry of Mercy Heart. Certainly not everyone is cut out to do the ask. I get that. It's hard for me too. But then it occurred to me, you and I are really not asking for money for the ministry of Mercy Heart. You and I are advocating for hurting families. You and I are standing in the gap between full-blown crisis and spiritual, relational, and material solvency. Which is easier, to ask for funds to help float a ministry or to ask for funds to help families in a full-blown crisis? I think I'd rather be asking on behalf of families who have no voice and no advocate. What do you think? So it presented a mind shift. They've been together 17 years when he wrote this, and their board only thought about raising money to float the ministry. And when he wrote that, it shifted the whole mindset of the board. It's very well put, I thought. He's a very passionate guy. Now, I recommend that you go and look at the donor-centered pledge, and you go to this, you click on that, print it out, give it to your board, post it in your office. I think it's 23 points of how to be donor-centered in your fundraising. But this is a quote at the end of that I brought to the webpage here, and it says, "I am a joy bringer. As a writer of fundraising communications, that's my basic job description. Joy monger. My job is to put joy in someone's heart. I know from research and experience that if I focus on making my audience, my donors and my prospects, feel good about themselves because they've chosen to join my good fight or stirring campaign or worthy cause, then I will never ever have to worry about bringing in money or retaining donor loyalty. Those will follow in abundance." I love that. It's all in your attitude. It really is. What's the essential thing that you're doing as a fundraiser, and I think that says it as good as anything I've ever seen. We're going to talk about resistance. You're going to, if you're just going to get resistance, it's a controversial cause. You're going to get some resistance. Well, I found there's two kinds of resistance. External, which is prejudice against your cause, okay? And there's internal resistance, which primarily is fear. There's a lot of fear, intimidation in fundraising. But you have to see yourself as an activist, because you are an activist. And when you're an activist, resistance comes with the territory. Don't buck the system, just embrace it, okay? Embrace the fact that there will be some resistance. Not everybody is going to agree with your cause. You might have not only be prejudiced against, you might actually be persecuted, okay? That's because that's what happens to activists, no matter what cause they're in, okay? That's part of being an activist. And most leaders we have found have a natural resistance to fundraising. It's hard to ask people for money, okay? And the next 2 points are sort of juxtaposed against each other. It takes humility to ask others for money, but it also takes self-confidence to risk being turned down. You have to be humble and self-confident in that at the same time. And then it takes passion. To make someone give money, you have to believe in what you're doing so strongly that they will also believe at that same level. Overcoming intimidation. Most people can't even get started in fundraising because they feel intimidated by the very activity of fundraising. So to overcome that, you have to recognize that activism is an exchange. You give people knowledge, and they give you a commitment. That's what you're trying to do. And I think there's some joy. You're also giving them some joy to feel like they're making the world a better place. Okay. But that's the essential aspect of activism is that it's an exchange. Raising money is at the heart of activism. No matter what your cause is, no matter what it is, the full social spectrum, you got to do some fundraising. So it's like public speaking. Very few people feel comfortable getting up and talking in front of a crowd. It's like a human condition. Well, most people just don't like asking for money, but you're going to have to do it, and you're going to have to really master it. It takes courage, but it also takes practice and good old-fashioned hard work. I always say the hide of a rhino, the heart of a dove. You got to have those two things working. Don't be afraid to ask other nonprofit organizations for support. If like Cure or some other big organization that's doing it, ask them either for some money or ask them for some advice, ask them for some help. How did you guys do it? Learn from other organizations, but some organizations have gotten started because other organizations gave them some money to help start. That's a good place for some seed money to get you started. Other sympathetic organizations, and most people don't think about that, going to other nonprofits. Okay, that's definitely worked for some groups. Leverage your core group. Those first few donors that you get are the most important ones. Those first 4 or 5 people who actually write you a check and get you started, you're going, and you can leverage that and say, look, we've had these other 4 or 5 people give to us, so should you. It's hard to get that first big donation, but when you do, use their show of support to convince others. That you've really kind of tipped it when you get that first big one. And that gives you confidence to go do that. You think, well, I can do that again. Sum up, still afraid of taking risks. Think about the families who are suffering today and the fears and risks they face. Because your fear of fundraising is not nearly as critical as the fear of not being able to put groceries on the table. People you're trying to advocate for. Yeah. So make your struggle seem smaller. Okay. Finally, just kind of summing up, CSFs, that stands for critical success factors. These are the things you got to do. You got to get out of the old mindset into the new. Plan your work and work your plan. Watch out for those designated gifts where they give you something designated only for one particular thing. Don't ever spend that on something else, outside of what they designated it for, as we talked about earlier. That's where a lot of legal problems get into boards, and nonprofit leaders go to prison, actually, over some things like that, misspending funds, mixture of funds, all that. Commit at least 25% of your organization's overall efforts to fundraising. Comprehensive case statement is a must. A great website is a must. Treat your donors, small or large, like gold. Overcome resistance with passion. And then from Galaxy Quest, never surrender, never give up. And I was actually going to have Tim Allen come on and say that, but they said there was no sound available in this room. I was like, oh, he'd just be like silently saying it.
How can you tell me about the difference between a private foundation and a public charity? I mean, we're incorporated as a 501c3, and we've been filing as a private foundation so far, because my understanding is there are much more detailed disclosure requirements in terms of the tax forms, which are public documents that get put on the web. I mean, there are websites that will put your tax returns up there for
Yeah,
anyone to
99%.
investigate. Given that these are controversial and sensitive causes that we're concerned with, not every donor necessarily wants the information to be out there in public that they have donated. I mean, as a private foundation, we only have to put the donations on our return if they're $5,000 or more. Is that different for a public charity? I mean, what are the other disclosure requirements that one needs to pay attention to if one is a public charity as opposed to a private foundation?
Before you answer that question, I have a suggestion. The name of our foundation does not have the word sex offender in it.
That's a great suggestion.
You know what it's called?
Rick, we were just talking about that, weren't we?
It's called the Family Safety Foundation.
Right.
And nobody has a problem writing a check to Family Safety Foundation. Nobody's CPA rather asks weird questions, and they don't mind the public knowing that they made a donation to the Family Safety Foundation.
Thomas, and I'm not an attorney, and I think you are, right?
No.
You're not? Okay.
He's a professor.
Professor, that's what, because I heard you speak back in February, but I couldn't remember what you did. I'm not an attorney, so I really don't know the legal answer to that.
A tax attorney or a CPA would know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Well, you guys have been in a conference all day today, so you're probably ready to go. So I won't keep you any longer, but I'll stay after and talk and whatever I can do to help.
Thank you.
Hope y'all enjoyed it.